Now everything is under our control, but at some point in the future, I'll talk about the principles of this, that needs to not be the case. So, of course, our hopes are we can gain censorship-resistant hosting, maybe subpoena resistance through this, and that really what we're talking about is something that feeds that middle spectrum of users, right? That this is a sort of stopgap solution to getting on something like Tor where everybody can use it and it's functional. So we call these things server cells because they're named after like guerrilla resistance cells, such that they have the principle that no one cell is a strategic asset that can be taken down. So you can lose 1 to n cells and content won't suffer interruption. And so you can kind of see, oh wait, you guys will enjoy my diagrams. This is just engineering paper with pencil and I scanned it and then threw like some Visio stuff on top because I'm really bad with Visio. So here's the internet. We have these cells in Oakland, San Jose, and Sweden, and they're connected through a virtual private network to data sharing. So there's a couple of principles. One is distribution of responsibility, isolation of control. So an admin should have control over only their cell resources, and the user should have control over the resources they provide on that service as well. So if I'm the admin and there's a service, call it an HTTP service for foobar.dod.net, and it gets a takedown notice, I can actually say, okay, well this can't be hosted in the cells that I control under my jurisdiction. So I can say, okay, this is going to be in San Jose or Oakland, but it can still be provided in Sweden. Now this is in the case where we're still not in control of the Sweden box. Now, but the user can say, hey, you know, Sweden's way too far away, I don't want to offer my content there. And they can not offer that content in Sweden. And this is sort of the case for an Australian user that we have, that they don't want to offer the content in their country because, well, I don't know, you guys should pay attention to Australia. They're getting right up there with Iran and North Korea as far as their internet privacy laws. So then the other principle is that we should have redundancy of data. That is that it needs to be in more than one jurisdiction at a time, and that a resource should have jurisdictional resilience. And part of the redundancy of data is the jurisdictional resilience, but that it should enjoy jurisdictional diversity. And there's an important thing here is that no individual or organization should be in control of all nodes of the network. If they are, then in certain cases, you know, something that's hosted in Iran or Australia, if an admin is there and they have access to the boxes in Sweden or somewhere else, then they can be coerced into releasing information or taking that content down. And so the principle here is that you wind up with different sets of individuals and organizations in different countries, all in control of cells that work off the same infrastructure. And so that's what we're trying to build, is something that's open source enough that people can set it up, and then a community of people that can join together to offer this. And we could certainly use developer help, so if any of you are interested. And so I think you guys are going to like this one. I'm going to go a little bit fast, but I want to do a thought experiment. So again, I want to remind you of the guilty until proven innocent 10-day denial of service attack, the backdoor takedowns, and the endless chain attack and ISP liability. So all of these things are problems that we've outlined in the DMCA. So I want to pose a couple of rhetorical questions, which is that what if we treated those problems, what if we treated those failings as protocol failings, right? So what if we actually say, oh, well, this is just a protocol. This stuff is vulnerable to attack, as we've demonstrated earlier. And what if we treated our lawmakers like software vendors, right? So we tell them, hey, you know, this stuff, this is a problem. And what if proof of concept code could be used to highlight DMCA protocol flaws, right? So this is how could we, you know, or could we use software to really take advantage of these flaws and show that this stuff doesn't work, that the protocols that they've outlined in the statutes are flawed. So responsible disclosure, most of you probably know this. So it requires that, you know, say the vendor releases buggy software and then a security researcher finds some sort of theoretical vulnerability, informs the vendor. The vendor chooses not to fix the bug. So the researcher winds up releasing this as a white paper, whatever, to the public, saying like, hey, look, this could probably be leveraged as a problem. And then the vendor still does nothing, maybe perhaps arguing that the attack is too theoretical, that it would never work. So the researcher writes proof of concept exploit code. And then this last item I said, the vendor must fix the bug. That's actually not the case. They can probably write a DMCA takedown notice and prevent the researcher from releasing this stuff. So here's the theoretical attack. We're going to imagine what happens if we amplify Project DoD versus Federici. That is, that it's not just him, but that all of the things that he highlighted, we're going to take advantage of those, but on a mass scale, right? So lots of people. I want to posit a malicious actor named Mallory. And then I'm going to throw together, just design, or maybe use a bot network of nodes that can send well-crafted DMCA takedown notices and follow-up notices to multiple ISPs against multiple users. So think of this as a sort of web crawler that goes around, finds content, creates these takedown notices, and fires them off en masse to all these ISPs. So we have a couple of requirements. One is that Mallory's identity stay hidden. And that any node that sends the takedown notices cannot be tracked back to her. This is like basic bot network principle stuff. But that the nodes themselves need to be exposed. They can't be like behind Tor or something like that, because that's statistically interesting information. So the abusive takedown notices must look like legit notices. So you can use random looking letterheads, say off chillingeffects.org. You can throw together whatever you want, as long as there's statistically and this kind of goes towards spam fighting, right? As long as they're statistically indistinguishable from real takedown notices. So then, you might even put anonymous contact information on, say like a prepaid cell phone or VoIP or something like that, maybe Tor access to an email account. And then when this thing sends notices, it needs to send them to all first-order ISPs. And when I say first-order ISP, I mean ISPs down at the leaf nodes. If you think about it like a tree, although it's more like a web, but if you think about it like a tree where ISPs sort of have a parent, you want to send takedown notices to all those first-order ISPs. But you also want to send them to the nth-order ISP, so you want to go up the chain so that you can do the backdooring attacks under certain conditions. That is where the content is still up, or when it goes down and then comes back up. So so you have those two conditions to send takedown notices, and then there's a sort of side effect that's kind of interesting here, which amazingly enough Federici also highlighted, which is that you can send a takedown notice to a search engine, say Google, and get the content removed from the index as well as the cache. But the interesting thing here is that Google doesn't have a user for that content, so there is no counter notice procedure, right? So you send a takedown notice, it gets removed from the index or the cache, and then there's no user to say this was a fraudulent takedown. So you can basically remove the content from search indexes as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just let's say we'll use Gearman, right? I'll just give you an overview of what it is, but it's a distributed job processing server, and you have a bunch of clients that send a payload to a job server registered for function, foo, or whatever. And then that job server sits there and workers connect to it and say, hey, I can do job foo, do you have anything for me? And so the workers pick it up and do the work. And so all of this scales like 1 to n at any point. And what we're going to do is sort of shim this in at the two connection points here, where the clients connect to the job server, the workers connect to the job server. We'll shim that through the Tor hidden service protocol. This is not like it wouldn't work out of the box, but there's an interesting project that we're working on that could make Gearman do this. So the client API is basically you can write it in whatever language you want, and then you shim it here at the arrows. It goes to the job server. You have the shim for Tor as well over here, and the workers can pick it up and they can be written in whatever you want. And then more of my fun diagrams. So we have Mallory over here with the little horns, and she has a takedown notice. There's a Tor onion network, a Gearman server, and then a bunch of zombie workers and ISPs over here. And so what's going to happen is Mallory constructs a statistically, I should say a takedown notice that is basically the same as any other takedown notice that an ISP would receive. And Mallory fires it off through the Tor onion network, and it lands on this Gearman job server. And then workers register for that function, so they pick it up. And so both the client connection from Mallory to the job server and the connection from Gearman to the worker was obscured through the Tor onion network. And then these zombie workers essentially can take that takedown notice or the mass amounts of takedown notices that Mallory is firing off the job server and just shoot them off at the ISPs. And so, if you know, we're working under the current regime, then ISPs are going to be shutting this stuff off until they realize, wow, we're losing a lot of users shutting this stuff off. We can no longer really do this. So the service provider can choose to follow the counter notice procedures, but then there's still the 10-day denial of service attack, and there's you have to take into account the backdooring as well. Like the ISP may not even be in control. So ultimately, I think if the volume was great enough, right, if somebody were to actually launch this type of attack, the volume was great enough that that these notices were statistically indistinguishable from real notices. So you have this really bad signal to noise ratio. That ISPs would be forced to ignore these notices. So the law becomes unenforceable. ISPs are no longer complying with takedown notices, and ultimately it needs to go back to Congress for a rewrite. And so this is what you need to do.
How do we fix this? Here's some recommendations. The 10-day denial of service attack isn't working. This is a problem for content. The chaining attacks, if it's the same content, don't file the same DMCA takedown notice. This is a problem, and there should be liability associated with doing this. Let's see, ISP liability is also a problem, as Chris mentioned when he was talking about this. This is a lot to tie, a lot of responsibility for the ISP. Time-consuming liability, this is a problem if you have some speech that you'd like to get out there and the ISP really doesn't care. And their profit margins probably are going to way above your what you have to say.
So the future would basically look like the past, right? So we'd be back to people having to get court orders to mitigate disputes, or I'm sorry, to arbitrate disputes between to an alleged infringer and an alleged copyright holder. So the ISP is no longer in the middle of this. I'm going to skip the conclusions and we'll just go straight to questions because we're right at the end. So you have about 4 minutes for questions. You guys can grab the white paper for this at the URL here or the slides at that URL. And
I'd like to quickly comment, someday your content might be the stuff that you're getting DMCA'd with your ISP. So if you care about these issues, support EFF. Public Knowledge in Washington, D.C. is working to change legislation. They're really trying to save fair use in the DMCA. They're a fantastic 501c3 nonprofit. And of course, support us if you can. We were also a 501c3 nonprofit because maybe you want your site hosted with us sometime. And chillingeffects.org, actually, if you ever get takedown notices or patent infringement letters, Harvard Law School and Maine School of Law and like Stanford, they might take your case and help you out with answering that, helping you with deciding if you're going to should pursue that in court or not. So questions, please.
Sure.
Is Federici really making enough money off of his books and all that he can afford all this litigation?
He appears to be independently wealthy.
Can you repeat the question?
Okay.
Yes. So is this attacker, Federici, really making enough money off of his books and all to support all this litigation? And my answer was he appears to be independently wealthy enough to do so.
It appears, we're not really sure, but maybe he has a pro bono attorney working